Claim they like riding, but I know that they ain't. Ride or die. I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.
Alright guys, good evening. Please click the video like and subscribe button. I appreciate it. Every little bit helps. In this discussion that you'll get to see, a short little back and forth where V is laying out what would be evidence, and an example that's used is evidence for shoe stealing fairies. Godless girl catches V at the end of the discussion, and she realizes what happened, but I don't think V realized how he got caught. But please watch the video and enjoy, and leave your comments in the comment section below.
Ignore this worry. There's another worry raised by Gregory Dawes, which is that once you build in all the necessary thing for the theory to explain the explanandum, meaning it entails the explanandum, where you have to build a rationality principle, you have to ascribe God a number of desires and goals that are gonna entail the explanandum. At that point, any naturalistic explanation is gonna win, because such a theory is not going to be very informative. You're not proposing some kind of a mechanism by which we could make precise predictions, the way that scientific laws do. You're inflating the ontological economy by positing things like transcendence, ontological economy, causal relations that involve something non-physical. It doesn't fit into a research program that is progressive because it violates methodological naturalism. It doesn't cohere with the background knowledge of the scientific community. Um, um, and also once you've built so much into the theory, it's hard to see how it could ever be falsified. If the only prediction it makes is the explanandum, how is the theory testable in any way? And given those considerations, a naturalistic explanation is always going to be better. So those are the reasons why theistic explanations always fail.
Now, and I appreciate that that was packed full, and I'm not going to pretend like I could interact with a lot of what you just said. But I'm glad this is recorded because it's something I would definitely like to listen back to. But
Sounds like verificationism.
I want to say something, Andrew.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to argue with Venus and Jack. They'll get mad at me, and I don't think I would do very well. But just something, what Venus is saying, something about it doesn't sit right with me. And I'm not saying that he's wrong, but what he's saying is that if a Christian says, "Look, on the hypothesis that Christianity is true, the rapture is going to occur," we're going to see Jesus come out of the sky, and then there's gonna be these earthquakes, and this seven-eyed demon or whatever the fucking Bible says is gonna happen comes out of the ground and starts grabbing people, whatever. He's saying what Venus is saying entails that if the Christian says that is predicted on Christianity, and then we see that happen, the rapture occurring and all those things happening, that's still not evidence that the Christian God exists. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna mute my mic now. I'm not gonna argue.
Well, first of all, the Bible isn't a theory. So I think there's an equivocation on the word predict there. But there's a distinction in philosophy of science between accommodation and prediction. So the theistic explanations merely accommodate the explanandum, but they don't predict anything. And for it to be an explanation that's going to be in the set of the explanations we're going to pick the best of, it needs to predict things. So that's the first idea. And the second idea is by the theoretical virtues, the naturalistic explanation is going to be better. But take something
Hold up. Isn't the proposition that X will occur in Carlos' example, like the rapture, isn't that something that can be verified?
well, X to occur needs to be a prediction of a theory, not a prophecy of some guy saying it's going to happen. Prediction is a theoretical relationship here,
Sounds like
not
that you're making God some type of science project, what is the word, fabricationism or something like that, where you know what I mean?
No, no, no. I mean, like you can have non-scientific explanations. The point is that
Um,
explanation is a technical term. It's a relationship between an explanandum and an explanans. Um, but also, when we ask for explanations, I would say we're justified in accepting the best explanation. What we have in mind is not merely like stories. Because let's say that nobody had, let's say my shoes were stolen, and nobody has an explanation what happened to the
isn't
shoes.
that
But
presupposing some
Dutch,
type of background knowledge in terms of what the best explanation would be? And I heard you talk about logical positivism or some type of naturalism. Isn't that already presupposing some type of naturalistic outlook on what
not at,
is supposed
no,
to be
no, no,
expected or what
no,
cannot be
no,
expected?
there's no naturalism involved. There's no strong verificationism involved. Um, and I was going to give you like let me just give you an example, right? Let's just say that um, my shoes were like stolen.
Oh, it's a black
And
guy
we're
for
like
sure.
four people in the room, and the only guy who has an explanation is, let's say, me, and I'd say the shoe stealing fairies took them, and that's the only candidate explanation. Um, we wouldn't want to say at that point that you're irrational for
Yeah,
rejecting the shoe
because
stealing
of
fairies.
our preconceived notion of what is plausible, like so we are working with background information and assumptions there already, right?
Well, that's going to be part of it, but that's like sort of like the second step of the abduction process. That second step is once it is um, so like Gregory Dawes makes a distinction between potential explanation and actual explanation. But for it to be a potential explanation, that is, it can be a candidate amongst a set of explanations for being the best explanation. It needs to go through this preliminary appraisal phase, because we don't want just like any willy-nilly explanation, including just so stories. Uh, like
And that preliminary analysis isn't that done on assumptions with a certain criteria for what is most likely?
that is correct. Yeah.
Isn't that like question begging?
No, it's not question begging. It's what. Um, So maybe what you have in mind for an inference to the best explanation, what I have in mind is going to be differently. But the type of inference to the best explanation employed, sorry, the inference of
Oh, did he
explanation
cut
that's
out?
going to be employed in the sciences, amongst others, is going to include such initial appraisals.
So if somebody's like, well, if we take a camera and we put them on the shoes, then the prediction is we're going to see the shoe fairy come and fly away with the shoes, and then we put the camera on there, and then when we go to watch the video, there's something that looked like a fairy flying away with the shoes. That's still not evidence that there's a shoe stealing
No,
fairy.
but that's going to be a prediction. That's not merely accommodating the evidence. The point is, if an explanation merely accommodates the explanandum, absence of any novel prediction, then it doesn't get to be counted as a potential explanation.
So if somebody
So
then,
help me
after
out.
seeing the video,
Okay.
believes in the shoe stealing fairies, are they irrational?
Sorry, what?
If after watching the video and seeing the something that looks like a fairy with wings coming and flying away with the shoes and the shoes floating away in the air, if that person then believes that there's a shoe stealing fairy, are they irrational?
If the shoe stealing fairy hypothesis, merely predicting a shoe stealing fairy stole them, also predicts that if there is any camera footage in the house, then we should be able to see fairies. That's going to be evidence. That you could count that as a novel prediction. Um, you could count that as a novel prediction of the hypothesis. At that point, it's going to be fine.
Then is the rapture a novel prediction?
No, remember, prediction is a property of a hypothesis or a theory, not merely like some guy or some book saying it's going to. Maybe you could take the Bible or something and construct it in terms of some kind of a hypothesis, but it'll be hard to
Yeah,
see.
but according to you, on the shoe stealing, the shoe fairy stealing hypothesis, it doesn't make any predictions, right? So you are saying that that would be irrational even after you saw the camera footage.
I'm saying if the shoe stealing theory also predicts that if there is, well, it's going to be a retrodiction, but that's regardless. Predictions or retrodictions are different than accommodation. If it retrodicts that camera footage is going to show the fairies, that would count in evidence of the
It
hypothesis. At
doesn't
that point, we
predict
wouldn't say
that.
that the
It doesn't
hypothesis
predict
is
that.
merely.
It doesn't predict that.
Yeah, but to
Somebody could
say
say it
X,
does.
sorry, right, but that's why I'm saying if it predicts it. Evidence just means that, sorry, X is only evidence for Y. If Y,
Right, and you agree with me
sorry,
that the shoe stealing fairy hypothesis does not make any predictions, right?
if, well, I mean, I have to think of how to construct the hypothesis, but if it doesn't predict that, then that wouldn't be evidence. It's only evidence if it was predicted by the hypothesis.
Right, and it's
Because
not
That's
evidence is
question
going to
predicted by the
be,
begging.
hypothesis.
no, I'm actually, that's just not question begging. That's actually going to be cashed out in terms of like logic. Evidence is going to be an inferential relation. If a theory doesn't predict some kind of an observation, then in no sense could that observation be evidence for the hypothesis.
But the reactor
That's all it
does
means.
predict a certain state of affairs to occur.
Yeah, so like all it means, so think about this, right? A hypothesis predicts a range of predictions. Probability raising just means that um, one of those observations is confirmed to be true. It doesn't verify the theory, it doesn't mean that the theory is true, but it increases the probability of the theory now being true. If like theory predicts A, B, and C and D, and D is verified, that raises the probability of the theory. Um, and so the idea there is to say evidence. Evidence just means probability raising. Something could be only evidence for a hypothesis if it's predicted by that hypothesis. If there is no prediction, it's not evidence. Now, in this
Did
case,
you
we
see
haven't
that?
actually
Did you guys see
constructed.
Venus dodge my question?
Wait, how did I dodge your question? I said if
The
it's predicted,
question
it's evidence. If
was,
it's not
is the
predicted, it's not
person who
evidence.
watches the footage of the fairy
Uh-huh.
stealing the shoes, are they irrational to now believe that there's a shoe stealing fairy?
Yeah, but look, your question is not specific enough. Is it predicted by the theory or not?
Did you see him
That's going
dodge?
to depend on a yes or no answer. I don't. I don't see a dodge. I'm just asking you to clarify: is it a prediction or not?
On your view, is it if whether or not on your view, it's not a prediction. So
If
it
the
is.
shoe stealing fairy, if the shoe stealing fairy does not predict the camera footage, then the camera footage isn't evidence for the shoe stealing
Yes,
fairy
if somebody who
hypothesis.
watches a fairy fly away with shoes on a camera is irrational to believe that a fairy flied away with shoes on a camera.
Yeah, provided it doesn't predict the footage. That's correct.
I'm going to mute my mic and
Yeah.
not say anything else. I have to stop.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.